Ok, so, vamos a ver el juego de Naruto que todo el mundo abandonó. Ese es el título. Shoutazo a Gacha. Y vamos a empezar. Son de 20 minutos. So, here we go. Si le gusta lo que está viendo, no olvides suscribirse al canal. So, vamos para allá.
Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Blazing was one of the very
Wait. I did something. Hold on. Ahora sí. No me di cuenta del audio. So, yeah, let's go.
games that I really got into. With its unique yet simple gameplay, its incredible artwork, and its peaceful ambience from the title screen, this game captivated players from around the world. To this day, you can still find comments reminiscing about how fun the game was, and how players would rush home and eagerly play the game after school. So what happened to such a beloved game to go from being widely praised as one of the best gacha games to being abandoned by everyone? Developed by Gree and published by Bandai Namco, Naruto Ultimate Ninja Blazing was the first and currently only mobile installment to the Naruto Ultimate Ninja series, which also includes the critically acclaimed Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm series. Ninja Blazing was a gacha game, a popular monetization system of games in Japan based on the gachapon machines. Naruto Blazing released in Japan on July 14, 2016, with global servers launching only 1 month later on August 24th of that same year. The game was met with mostly positive reviews, although some reviews did note that the gameplay was a bit repetitive. Quote, Naruto strikes again in mobile devices with a turn-based RPG that is fun but repetitive, end quote. Despite these somewhat middling reviews, the game flourished and quickly fostered a loyal fanbase. The core gameplay revolved around moving your units close enough to the enemy to hit them. This was achieved by tapping and holding your unit on their turn and dragging them until the attack radius around them would overlap with the enemy, thus initiating an attack. If a nearby ally's attack radius also overlapped with the enemy, then they would also attack, making positioning very crucial to maximize damage. Teams would consist of 6 characters, 2 frontline units, and 3 buddy characters in the back, with the 3rd frontline unit coming from your friends list. Frontline units could freely switch with their buddy at any point before they move, which helped promote bringing different kinds of units depending on the situation. Additionally, characters had field skills, which were abilities that units passively had when on the field. These field skills would scale in effectiveness depending on how close enemies or allies were in proximity with the character. For example, Naruto's Seal of Light's field skill would heal allies 150 HP if they were a good distance away, and 200 HP if allies were right next to him. Finally, characters had buddy skills, which allowed characters in the back to help the frontliners. Characters also have special attacks called ninjutsus, which can be used when the chakra bar is filled. 1 bar of chakra is generated on a character's turn. Additionally, 1 bar of chakra can be generated for all frontline units whenever a combo of 15 or greater was achieved. This inherently made AoE ninjutsus almost always better than single target ninjutsus, since being able to hit multiple enemies made it much easier to generate chakra for the team. Additionally, 6-star characters had access to secret techniques, powerful special attacks that were meant to close out fights. These secret techniques required double the chakra of a regular ninjutsu, and often would take the entire length of a mission to be ready, making them a rather rare occurrence to see in-game. On release, the game had 3 modes that the players could participate in. Was Story Mode, where players could experience the Naruto story in PowerPoint form, interspersed with gameplay. Emergency Missions, which were event missions that players could play, ranging from ramen missions to level up your units, to farming free units from a higher difficulty event. And finally, Phantom Castle, which was a monthly recurring PvP event where players could fight against defense teams that other players could set up and try to climb as far up the rankings as they could. Co-op mode was also available, in which up to 3 players could challenge some of the more difficult events together and all reap the rewards. Although because players were unable to play at 2 times speed, it was debatable whether or not it was faster to co-op. This is also not taking into account finding a lobby, connecting to a lobby, or if someone AFKs or disconnects from a mission, eating up even more time. From this point on, we're going to be primarily using the global server timeline for simplicity's sake. Ultimately, it doesn't make too much of a difference since the servers were later merged into one. So fast forward to September 15th, 2016, and the game releases its first major added feature, that being the limit break system. In Ninja Blazing, 6-star characters can reach a maximum level of 100, which gives them pretty respectable stats, like 1.5k attack is pretty good at this stage of the game. In an effort to keep these units relevant for a longer amount of time in the game's life cycle, the developers added limit breaking, a system in which characters will be able to increase their maximum level to 150. The only issue is that this process of limit breaking is extremely lengthy and very expensive. In order to limit break a 6-star character, you need 59 character specific limit break crystals, 7 elemental limit break crystals, 11 4-star elemental scrolls, 2 3-star elemental
Y decían que en Dokkan era bien difícil. Bien difícil hacerlo de hacer esto. Literal. Literal. O sea, farmear 50 y pico de eso para hacer tu personaje te toma tiempo. Y en realidad, si es que tú estás en 2 times speed, o sea, se pone bien. Se pone jodón. Se pone difícil. Pero bien difícil, mano. Hacho. Oh my god. Y eso que es empezar. Eso que le está explicando empezando. Empezando. So.
Elemental scrolls, and finally 5,769,600 Rio. Now this doesn't account for all the additional materials required to awaken some of the materials to 4 stars, so the actual numbers are much higher. Additionally, upon release, the trial missions for limit breaking characters did not guarantee which character crystals you got. So on top of the long grind of gathering all the materials, you also have to run the mission and hope that you get the crystals that you wanted. The elemental limit break crystals weren't much better, as even though there was a separate difficulty to farm them, there was 1 crystal for each element, and of course the odds were randomized on which crystals you would get as well. This was later remedied in the future by making the mission drop coins and being able to trade those coins for the materials you want in the trial coin exchange shop, but this wouldn't be implemented until about 8 months later. As if that wasn't enough, limit breaks were often released in batches of 3 to 4, so take all the numbers I previously mentioned and multiply them by 3. This means that to awaken a full batch of limit breaks, you need 177 character specific limit break crystals, 21 elemental limit break crystals, 33 4-star elemental scrolls, 6 3-star elemental scrolls, and finally 17,308,800 Rio. And with
Peor que esto es peor que Battlefield. Peor que Battlefield. Para tú conseguir por lo menos, que Battlefield hubo un tiempo que tú te tardabas 1 año y pico, casi 1 año y medio, para tú hacerle Rainbow a un personaje. Free to play. Free to play. Y ahora, pues, te pones a pensar con los Limit Break durante la era puedo decir, de Golden Age en Dokkan. Cuando tenías que farmear al Goku Tech, que tenía que ser 700 medallas, que no habían drop rates. Ay, Dios mío, papá. Ahí sí te puedo decir yo que acho, te lo ponen bien difícil. Alright, ok, ya. Tuve que hacer un arreglo. So, vamos a seguir.
these batches releasing on average once a month, players have their work cut out for them. Now, there's one key feature that I've neglected to mention up until now, mainly because it wasn't really accessible for free-to-play players or even low spenders. Amongst the other typical stats that you would find on characters, you would also find a luck stat. Each character starts with a luck of 1, and the only way to increase this stat was through fusing duplicate units into it. Fusing duplicates would also unlock abilities and significantly lower the cost of a unit. Since 6 stars were the only ones who could achieve a stat total of 99 luck, it became imperative to farm a character to max luck for the best chance at better loot, since having a 99 luck character as your lead gave you the best chances at getting a lucky drop at the end of a quest. Now in solo quest, the odds max out at about 46%, but in a full 3-person co-op lobby with 99 luck leads, this allowed for a 100% chance at a lucky drop, making it the fastest way to farm. Up to this point, there was no way to obtain a 99 luck unit without spending an absurd amount of money on the gacha to pull 100 copies of a unit. In comes the Hashirama and Tobirama raids. Released alongside the Heroes in banner, Hashirama and Tobirama were the first freely attainable 6-star characters, which finally allowed free-to-play players to be able to have a 99 luck unit. Even upon their release, they were pretty mediocre, but regardless, it enabled players to finally have access to the lucky drops. This set a new precedent for farmables, since after Hashirama and Tobirama released, every single farmable event character was a 6-star. Over the next few months, nothing of note really happened. New banners came and more event characters were added, but nothing of note really to shake up the meta. That is, until the first ever Blazing Festival banner. With the release of Minato, the banner structure in the game was forever changed. You see, amongst all the characters that were released in the game, there were always a few select characters that were a bit higher tier. These characters often released with a mission that dropped specific items to awaken the character. For example, Rock Lee needed 5 5 weights that dropped from his own specific event on the highest difficulty. Up until now, these characters never really had any labels, but now they were repackaged under the Blazing Festival character banners, meaning these were the only banners that you could pull these characters. Additionally, Minato also came with a new attack radius size, Vast. Up to this point in the game, there were only 3 attack ranges, those being short, mid, and long range. In order to compensate for the lack of reach, short-range characters often had better stats, so it stands to reason that with the absurd reach that a vast attack radius gave, that Minato's stats would be relatively bad to compensate for it, but his stats were good. Like, really.
So think of it as like a TV ad with a catalog.
Especially given his range. If we compare the stats of the previous Blazing Fest that only released 1 month earlier, you can see that Minato outranks Itachi in both attack, range, and HP. Now you can argue that Itachi still had a slight edge over Minato because he had an AoE ninjutsu, but as if that wasn't enough, Minato was given really good multipliers on his ninjutsu and secret technique. 11 times was unheard of at this point and was the highest multiplier in the entire game, and while ultimately Minato didn't really power creep the game, it was an ominous foreshadowing of how quickly the game's power creep issue would become. Jumping ahead to December 22nd of 2016, the Super Impact unit Jiraiya was released into the game, with his ninjutsu having a near 100% chance of inflicting slip damage, a huge AoE range, and the ability to immobilize enemies. This made Jiraiya an invaluable character just for his ninjutsu alone, but he also had a healing buddy skill, which made him even more sought after as healers were very rare to find for free-to-play players, quickly solidifying him as a must max luck unit immediately. But why was healing so important? In a game where there was such an emphasis on ninjutsu multipliers and big AoE ninjutsu, it seems odd that healing was such a big part of the game. If you can wipe out an entire room with one room covering jutsu, then what's the point of healing? This can mainly be attributed to the main strategy that players used on higher difficulty stages, that being stalling. The main idea was to kill all but one enemy on any given stage and leave one character next to the final enemy while the other 2 characters would run to a corner and heal each other every turn. This was done as a way to generate enough chakra so that all characters would have full
lo saqué ahí sin querer. Mira, ya esa estrategia no solamente para healing, también si vas a farmear este chakra. ¿Sabes? Tú farmeabas chakra y vas poquito a poco, poquito a poco, poquito a poco. Tú a ese personaje, tú ataca, 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 hasta que pues, consigas chakra también, ¿sabes? Que no solamente fue ¿sabes? No solamente fue vida, pero también cuando vas chakra, papi. Olvídate.
access to either their ninjutsu or secret technique going into the next stage. Stalling wasn't without its difficulties though, as stalling without enough healing could jeopardize the entire run. Not to mention coordinating a stall with randoms in a lobby was also incredibly difficult, as some people were unaware of the strategy altogether. In addition, the enemy AI might also just target the other 2 characters, so it was up to chance sometimes whether someone could stall long enough or not to regenerate all of their chakra. While difficult to pull off sometimes, the end result was entering the next screen, with all characters having full chakra, giving the players the most tools to clear the next screen. This is why healing was such an important factor in Ninja Blazing, as without the proper amount, stalling no longer was a viable strategy, and entering boss stages with no chakra was often a death sentence. So while difficult, these stalling tactics were often necessary to clear higher difficulty content, but soon players would receive 2 tools that would make stalling even easier than before. Jumping even further ahead to January 5th of 2017, the One-Tail Naruto Blazing Festival has just dropped, and alongside it, the Second State Sasuke Impact Mission. Second State Sasuke, or CM2 Sasuke, was arguably the most important free-to-play unit to ever drop into the game, and not for the reasons that you might think. It wasn't his decent stat line, nor was it the fact that his secret technique did 9 times damage to bravery element characters. No, it was actually his ninjutsu, which gave him 2 perfect dodges for 3 turns and restored 7 chakra. To put it simply, Sasuke would use his ninjutsu, and since it only costed 5 chakra and restored 7, he would actually have even more chakra than when he started, not to mention the perfect dodges, which allowed him to completely dodge any attacks without any damage. This effectively made Sasuke the safest character to do any stalling with, as the perfect dodges ensured 0 damage from the final enemy for 2 attacks over 3 turns, by which point he could simply just reapply the perfect dodge, rinse and repeat until all teammates have fully restored their chakra. One-Tail Naruto was excellent for stalling for the exact opposite reason. His ninjutsu allowed him to increase his attack by 50% for 9 turns and restored 2 chakra. Pair this with the insane multipliers on his ultimate and high attack stat, and and Naruto quickly became the definitive nuker for most content. These three quickly became the trifecta of stalling, and since two of them were free-to-play characters,
Durante ese periodo, ellos eran como que dice, en Legends, que tenían su Holy Trinity. Ellos también eran un Holy Trinity también en Blazing. Si no mal recuerdo, yo no tuve ese Naruto. Yo creo que yo empecé a jugar como en el 2018, si no mal recuerdo. 2018 o 2017. Fue por ahí, fue que yo empecé a jugar Blazing. Pero ya el juego estaba. Ya el juego tenía PvP cuando yo empecé. Oye, ya quiero ver ese tema de PvP. So que vamos a ver qué es lo que pasa.
this allowed many and most players to be able to properly stall and gather chakra for their team. Finally, after over 9 months since the game officially released, Ninja Blazing released its first new game mode, Ninja Road. Ninja Road was a set of 20 stages of increasing difficulty, featuring bosses every 5 stages. In order to offset the length of the event, players were allowed to bring 3 full teams into each run, 6 characters per team, so up to 18 characters could be brought into challenge the Ninja Road. First time completion of the event will award players with the elusive Acquisition Stone, a rare and very sought after item that allowed players to unlock an ability on a character.
Diablo, mano. Yo me jodí. Yo me jodí consiguiendo esa mierda. Porque no tenía dirección todavía cuando yo estaba jugando esto. A los varios meses después fue que me enteré que para qué tenía su función. Y para el colmo, hay un cierto límite que tienes que ponerle a los personajes que de verdad lo necesitan. O sea, que era algo que tú tenías que tener cuidado. Es como, no podría decir como los Elder Kais, pero sería como que esto es para ayudar a tus personajes para dupearlo. So, para que tengan esos skills. Así que, para farmear esto y para farmear el de 5 estrellas, para tú tener 6, yo creo que eran 7. No me acuerdo. No me acuerdo, pero era una cantidad. ¿Sabes? Tienes que tener. Para uno te tomaba tiempo para hacer uno.
And lower its cost. With how powerful some of the abilities have become, having a reliable way to unlock an ability without a dupe made characters
Mira eso. ¿Sabes? Para llegar al máximo. Yo creo que te dan hasta 6. Pero para llegar al máximo ¿sabes? You have to work your ass off. Si tú quieres tener un personaje fuerte para la PvP. Literal.
far more accessible to players, as they would no longer have to go for multiple copies of the same character to ensure all of the abilities. Additionally, Ninja Road awarded Granny Cat coins, which could be used to purchase several useful items along with exclusive characters in the shop. While Ninja Road was great for players since it allowed players to get their hands on more resources, each run took a considerable amount of time, with each run clocking in at an average of 20 to 30 minutes. And with these bosses having a considerable amount of HP, players needed all 18 characters to have a fair bit of investment into them to stand a chance against clearing Ninja Road. Even though Ninja Road was as difficult as it would absolutely pale in comparison to what was going to be introduced next. On August 10th of 2017, Gree would release probably the worst game mode in Naruto Ninja Blazing, a mode that was so reviled and hated that it arguably began the descent of Ninja Blazing to its end of service alone. Now, admittedly, this was just a test run to test the waters of the PvP mode, and at first, people seemed to think that the game mode, although not properly balanced, seemed like it had a lot of potential. Unlike in Phantom Castle, players would face each other in live real-time battles, and turn order was determined by a new speed gauge at the bottom of the screen, where character icons would move left to right, and upon reaching the right side would get their turn to act. How quickly characters moved left to right was determined by a new speed stat that was given to every single unit specifically just for this new game mode. The main concerns with PvP during its testing period was that certain units were too powerful to the point that if you were not running them, it would automatically put you on the back foot. This made for a frustrating environment that rewarded pay-to-play players who had nearly every single unit and punished
La pesadilla que era PvP. La pesadilla. ¿Qué era eso? O sea, era si no tiene. Aquí fue cuando cambiaron los banners. Porque tenían una semana para un. Digo, creo que eran cada dos semanas. Tenía un banner que era para tú hacer los stages normales con un personaje. Y tiene un banner que es el de específicamente para PvP. Yo no sabía eso hasta, ¿sabes? Ah, mientras me estaba orientando, viendo otros youtubers. Pero, ay, Dios mío. PvP, PvP. Sí, PvP. Se quejan de PvP. Mírame. 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 Se quejan del PvP de Legends. Se están quejando de Legends. Esto, esto, esto era lo tóxico de verdad. Lo tóxico de verdad.
Free-to-play players who had skipped certain units. Some characters who saw prominence during this time were Blazing Festival Kazekage Gaara due to his high chance of sealing ninjutsu, Blazing Festival Killer B for his high speed and his jutsu being able to one-shot most heart units, Blazing Festival Minato for his absurdly high speed and high nuking capabilities, and Blazing Festival Madara who was a good all-rounder and stats and had a powerful ninjutsu. Notice that nearly every single character who saw high usage was from a Blazing Festival banner, which means that if players weren't pulling on nearly every single prominent banner, players would be unable to keep up with the meta. But players were hopeful, since this was only a test run, that there would be plenty of time to implement balance changes and update the gameplay, and regardless, players had a much more important event to look forward to. On August 22nd of 2017, Blazing would celebrate its first year anniversary. For those who are unfamiliar with gacha games, anniversaries are usually the biggest and most hyped up celebrations and often serve as the highest points of revenue besides its release month. And Naruto Blazing's anniversary definitely lived up to the hype. The two headlining units were Naruto Seal of Light and Sasuke Seal of Shadow. Both were extremely powerful units who would greatly benefit any player who can manage to pull them. Both characters were separated into two different banners, which seems like a bad thing at first, but both banners had different
¿Sabes? Bad at first. Cosas que son así. No es bad. No es malo. Es natural. Es la naturaleza de los juegos de gacha. Literalmente. Porque Dokkan lo ha estado implementando hace mucho tiempo. Al igual que Legend está haciéndolo. El único juego que te podría decir que no está haciendo eso sería Seven Deadly Sins. Seven Deadly Sins tiene, Seven Deadly Sins tiene ese banner que es el de hasta 900 gems. Aunque ellos sacaron otro banner con otro tipo de tickets, pero eso es para los que quieren pagar. So, no puede decir que es malo, pero ya esto es una tradición que la mayoría de los gachas han hecho. So que, ¿sabes? Si te gusta X, oye, personaje, tú vas por ello. Si, si un personaje es mejor que el otro, pues tú vas porque es mejor y te olvidas del otro. So, o como yo hago a veces en Dokkan, pues si no me sale la unidad, pues puede que la unidad vuelva. Y a veces me voy para ese banner, aunque la unidad se ponga a decir que no es buena, aunque le hago lo contrario. Eso son cosas. So, es algo normal. Ya eso es algo parte del nicho y todo eso. So que, yeah, I mean, no, ¿sabes? Es solamente la opinión, ¿sabes?
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on, boy. You get your goddamn ugly ass on.
Me cago en la business. Leí donde no es. No quería buscar el de Victory Road. No. Hold on, dame un momento. Ok. Ya volví.
but both banners had different featured units, which gave players a bigger incentive for pulling on a specific banner. What was even better was that both banners had a step-up system, where for each multi, players would receive certain benefits, with the 9th multi guaranteeing the featured character. This made both characters extremely accessible to all players, as free-to-play players who had been stockpiling resources could guarantee whichever character they wanted, and those who were willing to spend could spend with the guarantee of getting the character fairly cheaply. For many, this was Blazing at its pinnacle, as both characters were powerful no matter which game mode they were in, and able to be guaranteed in only 9 multis. If Blazing could just continue this momentum, it could cement itself as one of the best Naruto gacha games, and a staple within Bandai Namco's growing roster of successful gacha games. But unfortunately, this trend wouldn't last for very long. On October 3rd, 2017, Gree would re-release Ninja World Clash in its official state, and aside from a few balance changes, not much was really changed. And to further exacerbate the issue, a new series of banners was released called the Blazing Bash banners. These characters were different from other characters in that they had 2 awakenings, one for PvE content and one for PvP content. The issue with these units is that they were extremely powerful and oftentimes meta-defining. So players now had to balance a limited supply of summons between the Blazing Festival banners for PvE content and Blazing Bash banners for PvP content. Additionally, there was a rampant hacking issue in PvP, where it would appear that the opponent would disconnect, but they would somehow still be awarded points. Many people took it upon themselves to report them to Bandai Namco, but it unfortunately fell on deaf ears, a concerning sign of things to come. Fast forward to August 21st of 2018. Expectations were high, and people were excited to see what kind of amazing things Gree had planned for the 2nd anniversary. With the amazing 1st anniversary celebration that the game had last year, players were excited to see what they had in store for the 2nd one, especially with the game being in the state that it was, with PvP being an absolute mess, and with no really good free-to-play options such as Jiraiya or CM2 Sasuke. The game was in a rather low point, with not much to do outside of farming Ninja Road monthly and limit breaking. So the game really needed a good anniversary to generate hype and bring in returning players again. With leakers leaking the art of the anniversary units ahead of schedule, excitement for the anniversary was at an all-time high.
Aquí fue donde yo entré a Blazing. Sí, ahora sí me acuerdo. Aquí fue donde, como tal, cuando hicieron el de Final Valley, Naruto y Sasuke, que literal ellos se defendían con todo, literal. No, yo creo que yo saqué a Naruto, pero no sé si y no saqué otras copias. Yo creo que yo usé los gems para esto, pero de ahí fue que yo empecé a jugar Blazing como tal. Pero era más por ello. Such a good times. Y sí, el PvP todavía estaba jodón y jodo.
High. Unfortunately, when the banners were announced, players would be sorely disappointed. Much like the 1st anniversary, the anniversary characters were yet again another Naruto and Sasuke. These 2 characters were separated into 2 different banners with different featured units, but there was one notable feature that was missing from both banners. There was no step-up feature. And since this game doesn't feature pity systems like most modern gacha games do, this meant there was no way to ensure that you could guarantee either of the featured units. As if this wasn't enough, the rates of the banner were changed so that it would be more difficult to pull the featured units. This greatly outraged the community, and people were quickly losing their good faith for Gree. The final nail in the coffin would come on January 21st of 2019, when Ninja World Clash was replaced with Ninja World Ultimate Showdown, Gree's final attempt at fixing the PvP mode of the game. Not much was changed, unfortunately. Blazing Bash characters still ran rampant and held the meta in an iron grip, so players were still forced to pull for the newest and latest Blazing Bash units. Hackers were still plentiful and causing issues on the leaderboard. However, Ninja World Ultimate Showdown introduced the 5 Kage League, a separate league that players needed to qualify for. There were a limited number of slots, so people would need to compete against each other to get into these limited slots. Players who placed high in Kage League would be given an exclusive unit. If these units were just trophy units, it would be fine, but oftentimes units from 5 Kage League or 5 KL units were often meta-defining and had the PvP in a chokehold. This made it even more difficult for newer players to get.
No es por nada, pero ese Naruto era bastante bueno. A mí me gustaba. A mí me gustaba mucho usar ese Naruto. Lo que tuve la suerte de obtener esa unidad y usarla. Porque literal, con el tiempo que yo yo llevaba jugando. O sea, PvP estaba. Y era la única forma que yo tenía para defenderme. Creo que. Sí, eso se entiende, porque yo creo que se vende licencias, no. Tienen personajes así que te lo dan solamente para tenerlo en la caja. Pero, en mi opinión, hicieron bien con ese Naruto. Que ese Naruto literal ayudó. Pero al menos a mí me ayudó y yo sé que a otros players también. So, la cuestión es que él todavía no ha mencionado, él no ha mencionado la pendejada cuando tienen los mismos personajes. El que no entiende eso, y yo no sé si él lo explica aquí, pero lo voy a explicar. Hubo un punto que la gente usaba 6 Hinatas, 6 Minatos y, o sea, 6 del mismo personaje. Eso hacía que PvP no fuera jugable por tiempo, por cosas así. O sea, dejó de ser. Ahí fue cuando dejaron de ser fun. O sea, literal, se puso demasiado, demasiado. Estuvo fuera de control. Demasiado fuera de control. So que, yeah.
Get into PvP as if they didn't have a decent number of Blazing Bash units and the 5 Kage League units, you were already at a disadvantage. People began to quickly realize that Greed hadn't really changed much and that PvP remained as a stale and unfun game mode. This, in combination with how they handled the second year anniversary, killed any and all momentum the game had, and as a result, a large chunk of its player base left, and the game never really recovered after that. The game continued to steadily decline through all of 2019, and on May 20th, 2020, Greed attempted to breathe new life into the game by adding a new rarity of units, the 7-star units, but unfortunately it was too little too late, and the game would ultimately close its doors on February.
Yep. Él no mencionó lo tóxico que tuvo PvP con los mismos personajes. Literal. Yo que fue el último Madara que habían hecho. Con 2 Madara, tú te jodían porque cuando él hacía uno de los special moves que te retrocedía a 2 personajes. Eso es demasiado. Y vi ese Sasuke y me acordé de ese Sasuke también ayudaba bastante. Y el banner de. Ok. Ese banner fue una pendeja porque yo me tiré para Sasuke. Pero Sasuke no era tan. Era más tanque si no me equivocaba. Y él aguantaba más golpes. Que fue una pendeja para sacarle un 7 estrellas porque el banner era igual al de aniversario. O sea, que no tenía step-ups ni nada. Lamentablemente. Yo hubiera querido yo hubiera querido que le hubiera metido más tiempo al juego, mano. Y no lo hice. O sea, haciendo otras cosas y eso, pues. Me olvidé de Blazing hasta que se dejaron. Yeah. Pero quiero decir algo antes de que se acabe.
9th of 2021. Naruto Blazing is a prime example that shows that no matter how good the launch a gacha game had, or how popular the IP it's based off of is, it can and will eventually disappear. With just a few poor decisions, the game went from being widely revered within the gacha game space to quickly being abandoned by its player base and its developers left to be forgotten, resigned only to a distant memory.
Sí, tacho. Si mi memoria no me falla, lo último que estaban haciendo era ponerle equipment a los personajes. Pero lamentablemente el juego fue cerrado, ¿verdad? Durante 2021. Así que en verdad no, fue buen video. Sí, hay par de cositas que él no mencionó, pero pues yo lo menciono aquí porque, o sea, lo vi no solamente con otros contenidos, con otros de contenido, al igual, o sea, lo viví, ¿sabes? Me sorprende. Hay algo que me sorprende de esto, que Dokkan tiene servidor privado, tiene los bots, al igual que otros juegos. Me sorprende que no hayan hecho como un servidor privado para Blazing. O sea, solamente para jugar. Porque literal, si lo hicieron con Dokkan, obligado, al igual que con Legends, tiene que haber. sea, con todos estos juegos, bueno, nada, no con todos, pero con algunos que posiblemente puedan tener su servidor privado. Para que, ¿sí? Aunque lo mantengan activo y la gente, pues, mira, jugar el Blaze un ratito. Así, tú sabes. Em, pero sí, fíjate. Esa hubiera estado buena. Eso hubiera estado buenísimo para un servidor privado de Blazing. No lo jugaría todos los días, pero jugaría, tú sabes, para pasar el rato y. You know. Pero pues, el juego fue bueno. Por lo menos hay gente que lo recuerda de vez en cuando. Diré que fue un juego con un potencial grande. Si, si mira, si no lo hubieran shut down, estuviera a la par con Dokkan, con One Piece, Touch of Cruise, al igual que Legends. Ya ellos yo que habían dicho que antes de que se dejaran iban a tirar los de Boruto, pero no pasó. So que hubieran tirado ya cosas de Boruto, hubieran tirado cosas de movie, pero como también escuché que, pues ellos se volvieron greedy, ¿sabes? Que por dinero no le importaba el fanbase. Pero nada, gente, sigan a Dokuro Gacha. Dio un buen documental, fue bastante entretenido. Así que nada, gente, hasta aquí lo dejo. Se me cuidan y los veo para la próxima.